we have food, we have content creation, we have top secret work. Like, it's all the above in intelligence. You know what I mean?
I thought you were gonna say something like, we have 3 idiots here who all managed.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. Yeah.
Hello world. This is episode 11 of Overinspected. I'm one of your hosts, Carrie, but I'm here with my friends Chai and Manu. And here we're gonna talk about maybe, I guess since we've been in speedcubers for almost a decade now.
Oh God. Do you really have to put it that way?
That is true, really right?
Cool. I mean, it's almost true, yeah. For some of us, it's
goodness.
True.
Yeah. No. Well, yeah, it's been a decade. Holy.
Wait, did you start in 2012?
Well, I first started cubing when I was in middle school. I didn't go to a comp until 2013, but yeah, I started cubing in 2012. That's wild.
Oh my gosh. I think that's something to be proud of, right? Like, with age comes wisdom.
Oh.
Yeah. Yeah, but I think the plan for this episode is there's a lot of newer cubers out there, and I think, given our experiences, maybe there's some sort of tips we have, ways of, teaching newer cubers, like what paths to go down later in their cubing careers.
What paths not to go down.
Well, yeah, what paths not to go down. Maybe that's easier to teach, because I know I've definitely gone down the wrong path, cubing-wise.
I think...
How about let's start with that?
Yeah, we can start. Let's start. I think this one. Let's structure this one a little bit, because most podcast episodes are extremely unstructured, for both good reason and no reason whatsoever. But this one, why don't we start with advice towards just completely new cubers or people who want to get into cubing, want to get into speed solving, I guess in particular, and then we can maybe go down the rungs from there.
Right. Let's sort of start with things that we wish we knew on day one, maybe.
Yeah,
and
so...
I think...
Yeah, go ahead.
And I'm trying to, I'm searching the back of my brain right now for...
Yeah, so I have something. One. So go ahead.
Go ahead.
Try to go first.
Yeah, you go ahead. Yeah, either of you.
Color neutral.
Color neutral?
Yeah. I would have started color neutral if I could go back in time. I would do red, green, blue, all the above. Just... Starting out as color neutral just sounds so much easier, because I remember when I first started out, I was so clueless either way.
Yeah, so just to define what it means to be color neutral. These are also tips specifically for 3x3. Maybe we will turn this into a series where we do other events. We have some experience in other events too. But yeah, so for this one, we're really talking about 3x3. And to really get started, the way you solve a 3x3 is layer by layer, right? So you start with building one layer, which a lot of people can do, even if you just play around with it for
intuitively.
15 20 minutes, even hour, you can figure it out. And then you build the next layer and the next layer on top of that. So what Chai is saying is when we mean to be color neutral, that means that you start on any color that you want, instead of building the same bottom layer to always be white, green, red, whatever. Instead of fixing that, just allowing yourself to pick whichever one is good, and allowing your brain to kind of figure out the more higher level patterns that are happening, rather than these are specifically I'm looking for the white pieces in particular. Yeah, and it's kind of a hard thing to do, I feel at first for newer cubers, because it's just it's a lot easier for me to just ignore all the other pieces and only look at the pieces that are white. But once you get a better handle on it, yeah, I think all of us and many other cubers will agree that being color neutral is one of the best things that you can do to start yourself off on the right foot.
Yeah, it feels like something where the later you try to switch to being color neutral, the harder it is to get benefits from it.
Mm-hmm.
Which is it's sort of weird that the human brain works that way, but I guess it sort of locks it as you start to get faster and learn more advanced techniques. Your brain kind of locks into the way that you've practiced.
Yeah.
So,
well,
if you're always used,
I feel it's also related to the fact that if you're starting out, right, and switching from one color to another color, sure, you might be slower, but maybe you've learned how to solve the cube on white first, and now you want to switch to doing yellow. Sure, you're going to be a little bit slower, but the percent slower that you're going to be relative to your solve time is not significant, I think. Whereas like as you get faster and faster, like you don't really get faster at like determining white from yellow, but like your solve times continue to decrease. So the gap between the white and yellow increases in percentage, which makes which just like more de-incentivizes you. It's like, why would I do this when I'm just gonna get slower times anyway? Let me just do the way I've always been doing. But that is a bad mindset.
Yeah. That makes sense because, like when you're down to like a sub 10-second average, an extra 1 second like handicap because you're on the wrong color is everything. But when you're at like 30 seconds, it's not that big of a deal. One thing I was gonna say for myself is that like I thought I had always been color neutral, but then I decided to record like an average of 100, and I noticed that my 5 fastest solves, 4 of them were on white cross and 1 of them was on orange. And I thought to myself, like, it could be random chance, but more likely it's a sign that even though I started color neutral, I have gravitated towards white cross, and I'm just like naturally a little faster, but I just don't notice it. So I guess it's a sign that you can lose your color neutrality if you don't keep it up.
Yeah, and there's some colors I think that are easier to become, like, they're easier to switch to. So for example, like, Carrie, if you're like a white cross solver, it seems a lot easier to switch to like yellow, the opposite color, than any of the other colors. So because I think that's what happened to me. Like originally I was green cross solver, but then I switched to white cross, and then eventually I added yellow. But adding white to yellow, like now, like to me they're the same. Maybe after all of these years they finally become like the same. But if I try and do anything else, it's just not even close.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think opposites. I mean, everyone knows they're opposite colors on a Rubik's Cube, like red and orange, green and blue, white and yellow. And I think something that I never did was like, if I know that white is on top and green is on front, I have to like think really hard to remember what's on left and right. Because I think that's not crucial when you're doing normal CFOP, because the centers will sort of tell you.
Right.
But I think that like maybe if you always solve on the same color, that stuff you do learn because you get the same exact cross every time and you get the same exact colors every time.
Right. Yeah. Like recently, because I've switched to ZZ, like my orientation is the exact same every single time. So I just know that like, you know, red is going to be in my right hand and orange is going to be in my left hand. Like now it's just locked into my head that it's going to be exactly that way every single time. So yeah, I guess it's just like if you do it in the same pattern, it probably ends up that way. I would imagine it's the same thing for Megaminx, right? If you have like the same order, especially in your S12,
oh yeah,
you probably have a good idea of like what comes next.
I wanted to bring up Megaminx because I feel like almost everyone has a set order. I guess Michael, you probably have a little more experience with this.
Yeah, I mean fixed order is definitely the meta for Megaminx. But first, I feel like before I go on to Megaminx, just wanted to wrap it up. But just like one other thing I thought for the 3x3 color neutral part, I just thought that because you don't time a lot of your solves starting out. That's like literally hundreds and hundreds of solves at the very beginning of your cubing career that I wish I just knew, where I didn't even care about what time I got. Like that makes a huge difference, because the more you care about the speed, the less you feel incentivized to do that.
Yeah, that's also a good tip. Yeah, don't overtime.
But like, yeah, exactly. The 3x3, when you start out with one cross color, it's actually very similar to the concept of Megaminx fixed order. You're basically picking a select color palette essentially and just sticking with it. Most people don't start out dual neutral. They end up learning it because it's easier to learn because you just flip everything 180. But you could think about learning 3x3 one cross as a variation of Megaminx fixed order. The difference is the difficulty is because this is 6 colors, whereas Megaminx, and sorry if you're an audio listener, sorry about that, but I am holding up 2 different puzzles. The Megaminx will have 12 colors. So if you think about how much it matters to keep track of what's to the right of orange, what's to the right of yellow, what's to the right of blue, is going to be a lot more difficult if there's 10 other, well, I guess in Megaminx, if you don't count the top 2, if there's 8 other colors or 9 other colors to account for.
Mm-hmm.
That's really difficult. And then not only is it that many colors, because there's so many extra colors, there's also more sides. There's like 3 different colors that attach to that one color that you're thinking about. So that's why you can think about 3x3 one cross as a similar learning scheme to fixed order. It's just being familiar with the color scheme. That's pretty much it.
Right.
Because you're still familiar with 3x3 color scheme. It's very similar. And then for Megaminx fixed order, what that means is you solve the top half of the Megaminx in one direction, and usually you start from the same color. There are a handful of people that can go in other directions, so usually you go clockwise, or I guess for me it'd be clockwise and then counterclockwise. I always go counterclockwise. But for the most part, I don't think there's a huge benefit to it, just because you have so much time to make up, because there's so many pieces to solve.
Right, yeah.
Yes.
I can understand. Yeah. I feel like with 3x3, you can end up with these like really lucky cases.
Yeah.
That like, or saving like 5 moves is like dropping a second off your time. But on Megaminx, it's such a long solve session that you're probably gonna save up any lost time later. And like if you just spam TPS, it almost doesn't really matter if you know, choose the right next color or not.
The number of patterns you can get, it's just so overwhelming that it's like hard to keep track. Like the curve of beneficiality, I don't know, logarithmic. Like you
I
go
think
this way and then it plateaus
diminishing
at some
returns.
point.
Yeah.
There's diminishing
exactly.
Returns. There's diminishing returns on being able to see all the colors because there's just way too many of them. Now the most famous guy, what's his name? Robert? Is it Robert Yao?
Robert.
Is it Yao?
He is a guy. Yeah.
No, but is it
5x5
Yao that's color neutral on Megaminx?
On Megaminx?
Or is that Alexander Lau?
Alexander is the Rue
guy. Oh,
from like 2012.
Maybe it's Robert. I think it's Robert.
I think it's probably Robert because I think Robert is still active in the community. I think Alex dropped off the face of the planet.
Yeah, but what I will say is, since this episode isn't really Megaminx centric, I'll leave off with the color part. I'm not saying it's not worthy looking into though, because I am currently experimenting with like a lot of actually higher end Megaminx solvers have they do both orders, but they have the same scheme. But I'm kind of looking into having like different color schemes that kind of make your solve advantageous. So it's kind of like looking for color neutrality.
Yeah, sort of. I mean, you might as well give yourself the option, right? Where it's like, okay, if you see something that's interesting, then okay, like I'll go down this hole. Whereas like if you're just locked into one, then you won't even consider, like Carrie mentioned, like lucky cases and stuff. So yeah. Color neutrality is the big one. I think that basically every single speedcuber will recommend. Another tip I have for cubers who are just starting out is it doesn't really matter. Like, so now we have like many different cubes on the market, and you know there are some cubes that are like the flagship cubes, and there's a lot of other cubes that are like the budget cubes. And I feel like one of the things that I was really struggling with back in the day was like, okay, like is it going to be more beneficial for me to buy a high-end cube or like kind of a lower-end cube? And back in the day, I feel like it did matter. It mattered because like the lower-end cubes were really awful, and the higher-end cubes were way better. But now we live in an era of cubing now where hardware is extremely accessible to anyone. And I think like one of the best cubes I've ever used is the Yushin Little Magic. And that cube is like $5 or something. An extremely cheap cube, but you can use that cube to like break many barriers, and it's not really gonna hold you back until you get to like much faster. So that's one tip that I would say is like it doesn't really matter like what cube you have, as long as it isn't like, you know, like a Rubik's brand cube.
Rubik's.
Like if you get like any of the good budget cubes, you can get like a very good speed cube for $10, $15, $5. Like yeah, they're all out there, so take your pick.
Yeah, and I think I agree with that, and something I think about that helps like remind myself that is that Felix Zemdegs has a lot of videos of him getting 4s on a Diane Zanchi. And like it just tells me that like, oh, since I'm not getting 4s yet, it's not the hardware that's the problem. I mean, I know that like there's always some time you can shave by improving hardware, but like it's always like, you know, improving your look ahead and other factors than just like trying to increase your TPS on a kind of crappy cube.
Right. Yeah. I think what is cool though is like for me, I've noticed an effect of like whenever I get new hardware, my time seems to improve at least a little bit. But I think that's more the fact that's due to like, oh, I got a new toy, I want to play with it now.
It makes it exciting to practice. Again.
Yeah, exactly. It makes it exciting. So if that's the case, then by all means, like go grab new puzzles. But yeah, for if you're just starting out, really you're not going to find like huge differences. I think in the budget cubes versus the high-end cubes, and I think a lot of it has to do with feel. And feel is like it takes time to build feel.
Yeah, for 3x3 hardware, like you said, Manu, doesn't really make too much of a difference. Yushin Little Magic is a great option. However, I don't think the Yushin Little Magic that you're thinking of might still be in production. I'm not entirely sure. Because they changed it to the Yushin Little Magic M, factory produced magnetic, and then I'm not sure if it changed. I think it changed a little bit, but still a great puzzle. I would say that if I were to recommend the main puzzle to get for every single level is the Moyu RS3M.
Yeah, that's a great puzzle.
RS3M.
2019, 2020, 21, doesn't matter. It's very cheap, $10, something like that. You don't need to get something fancy, and it does the job.
What are your guys' thoughts on magnets for beginners? Do you think beginners need magnets, or do you think that they're fine without?
I don't think they need them, just for the same arguments we have said before. It's like, you're not gonna. I don't think a beginner needs to turn at 12 TPS on anything really. I know that like lots of kids will want to try just to see what they get, but if your main goal is just to like kind of have the lowest solve times, like magnets only come into play when you're starting to hit like sub 10, I think.
Well, I was also going to say one of the main arguments against like starting out with magnets is because it affects your turn style.
Yeah.
The way that you turn your cube is going to change. But I've kind of gotten used to the idea that higher end cubers just have a completely different turn style from the cubers of old, like the Felix, the Drew. You can actually see it when they turn the puzzle. It looks a lot different. So if you're gonna end up having that at the higher end anyways, might as well just start from the beginning. I don't think it changes anything.
Are you categorizing Felix and Drew as the old school?
A version of old school.
Yeah, I know that like they are old school at this point, but the reason why I kind of like was a little taken aback, well not really, is that I like if you watch videos of like Jessica Friedrich turning, she's the one who actually created the method in the 80s. Even if you give her like a speed cube like this GAN 11 M Pro, like she turns it like this, but she still gets like 14-second solves.
Right.
Because she sort of like optimized this way of turning.
Yeah, that's the thing, right? So like cubers who cubed on a Diane Zanchi, their turn style still carries over to magnetic puzzles. You still see the habits that they have. They're a little bit different, it's a little bit more rigid, and they're used to blockier puzzles.
Right.
I think it also sort of shows up in the algorithms that have been popular because with U-perms, right? Yeah, Zoomer Algs, like with all the S-slice stuff. Because like you couldn't do an S-slice on a Rubik's brand, so you see this sort of algorithm meta shift over the years, and now everyone's like, use these S-slice U-perms because they're faster.
Dude, every time I see an S-slice in an alg, I'm like, why are you doing this? Like, this, like, my brain cannot comprehend that this S-slice is like done like well, but people use them, right? So
it's helpful in blind, but that's a different story.
Yeah, but I did want to say that because we're talking about hardware, I'd be remiss to mention the fact that hardware matters if it doesn't feel good, right? So that's why old 3x3, like way back in 2015, pre-2015, you would actually have to make a very serious decision about getting a budget puzzle or the best puzzles. If you were looking into doing other events, it's something to consider going for the cubes that are in the meta, even if they are a little bit more expensive, because you're not going to practice 4x4 if you have a
bad puzzle.
That's a good point.
Yeah, you're not going to practice 4x4 if you have a Moyu, what's it called?
The Aosu?
Yeah, the Aosu. You're not going to practice with these days, with the type of 3x3s you feel, if you get a Moyu Aosu to start out for 4x4, you're not going to practice in it. You're just not going to be motivated to.
Yeah.
I mean, some people will, but most people won't. It's
I guess
very
the goal
important.
is to make it Yeah. Like the goal is to make it fun and also kind of like lower the barrier of entry when you want to like start practicing.
You want it to be fun at the end of the day. If I don't enjoy this puzzle, I'm not gonna solve on it.
Right, yeah. You want to find the line between like a budget cube that's decent and a budget cube that's just garbage or novelty, right? Because like, yeah, novelty ones are cool to look at and stuff, but they might not be like good for speed cubing at all. So that's an important distinction that needs to be made. But most of the time, you can avoid that by just seeing, okay, what do other people use?
I think side events, the meta is very, very specific. Like you're gonna choose between 1 to 2 different puzzles for most of the events, right?
That sounds about right.
I think so.
Yeah. Like I don't even know how many Rubik's clocks there are, but I can't imagine it's more than
1.
There were 3.
No, I mean there's only one.
There's only one good one.
Exactly, and that's like a prime example of like if you're gonna tell anyone to get in the clock, how are you gonna retain their interest in clock? Get them that.
They
clock.
gotta get that one.
So like so this clock is like $30 or whatever, right? And the old clocks were very, very cheap. They were like $10, but those clocks are so awful. And this one is so much better. This is worth your $20 extra investment. Like you will like just enjoy the event so much more. A lot of people hated clock in the like before the Chi clock came out because the hardware was just too bad. It was just like, I don't want to do this. This is not fun. So if it's obviously so Chai's point is absolutely correct. If it's just not fun to do, then and you think the cube is the reason, then 100% like you should definitely switch and look to upgrading.
Mm-hmm. I mean, since we're in the topic of other events, do you guys think what would be an event that you guys would give as the recommended event to learn as a new cuber, aside from 3x3? Do you have one?
I mean, for me personally, like 2x2 was the first event I learned. I think
same.
If you can do a 3x3, you can do a 2x2.
Yeah, you can optimize some things when doing a 2x2, but yeah, 2x2 is the easiest one to pick up. And if you're looking for a bit more of a challenge, the next is also 4x4. 4x4 is like it's like an interesting additional challenge that you can take on, and you can build on a lot of your 3x3 knowledge.
Exactly. Yeah.
On 4x4, and I feel like once you do 4x4, I don't know. It's like this weird thing where I think like as you do like different events, it like builds, I feel like, spatial awareness, and all of them like will help each other. You'll get faster at doing 4x4 by doing 3x3. Well, somewhat obviously, and then you'll get faster at doing 3x3 by doing 4x4 because you'll just have a better understanding of where all the pieces go. It's a very gradual process. So.
Exactly. So like that's actually the part where I was gonna go to, where I think 2x2 would be probably an easy recommendation, but I would be like a harder teacher, and I would say the next event that you have to learn if you like cubing and if you want to be better. Yeah, no, seriously, like bamboo stick, do this, like this is your homework.
We all did it for fun. Okay, is it 4x4?
Definitely 4x4, but including 5x5.
Okay.
Because I think 5x5 trains your look ahead in a way that 4x4 probably doesn't. I think just for some reason 5x5 just has this tendency to activate your brain. I don't know if you guys have that feeling.
5x5 is to me more fun than 4x4 because of the fixed centers.
Yeah, exactly.
And also like the fact that parity matters a little bit, like is a smaller proportion of the solve.
Yeah, I guess that's true.
No, definitely, yeah.
Yeah. But something about it just feels cleaner. I don't really know how to explain it.
Well,
but yeah.
I mean, there's just a payoff to learning those cubes and being better at improving on them later on in your cubing career rather than learning 2 or Pira, usually, is how I feel.
Well, yeah, I guess I was sort of thinking of this more as, this is a beginning cuber who maybe like received a really crappy Rubik's Cube as a Christmas gift, and we're trying not to scare them away.
Oh, true.
For most people, like, they have to sit on their shelf.
I mean, 2x2 is pretty fun. It's a pretty fun event that you can pick up relatively quickly. So yeah, by all means. Yeah. I mean, by no means that you should be like, okay, like these guys said that I have to do 4x4, but every time I turn the cube, I cry. So but I still must do it. Like we don't want that, right?
No, don't do that. I guess it's a hobby.
it's a hobby. You should have fun.
Yeah.
Actually, I want to. So this is gonna be a little anachronistic, but I kind of want to step back a little bit and talk to a little bit of cubers who are thinking about picking up cubing. Do you guys have good tutorial recommendations? There are so many tutorials. We all learned using different tutorials, and nowadays like cubes come with tutorials, like with the, those little
I don't like that.
things. I don't like those tutorials,
Yeah,
but I think video tutorials are the
I
best. I feel like video tutorials are better than text, but yeah. What are some tutorials that you guys would recommend?
I, from personal experience, now I wouldn't recommend it. I learned how to solve Rubik's Cube from Me, Myself, and Pi's videos.
Uh-huh.
I mean, so like that was trending at the time in 2013, but they're not like bleeding edge these days.
Mm-hmm.
I think I mean JPerm is the easy. I didn't learn from JPerm. It's just JPerm has a knack for teaching.
Yeah.
And explaining very concisely, and his videos are like good production.
Yeah, they're like very good lighting always. And one thing I think that JPerm does well that a lot of other people are maybe scared to do is making the tutorials short and quick. Because like his video on how to solve a 3x3 is, I think it's like 10 minutes long. And I think other tutorials, they'll try to cover like every case and the video will be like 30 minutes long. So like what JPerm loses is that like some people might get confused because they won't see the case that they see on their cube in his video. But the thing that he gains is that more people will make it to the end because there's less video to watch.
Right. It's less intimidating.
So it's less intimidating. Like, oh, it only takes 10 minutes to learn. I can do that too.
The JPerm tutorial is really good. I think for whatever reason you have a personal vendetta against him. I think another really good one, the Cubicle, I think also has a really good good tutorial.
I was gonna say the Cubicle is interesting because I looked at their YouTube channel and like they don't have that many videos, but they have like the tutorial video and it has like 20 million views. Yeah. And it's like the only popular video on their channel, which I think is a testament to it being a high quality video. Yeah. And plus, how many other people just want to learn how to do this, right? And then if for some reason you really, really hate JPerm and the Cubicle, don't really know why, maybe maybe 1 in a million people. I think the Wired video that I forgot his name. I think Robbie, whatever, the same guy who did the documentary Wired video. He also has a video where he explains how he learned how to solve the Rubik's Cube. And I think that is also pretty well done. If you want to look at that as well.
I think definitely. That was all that stuff was good.
Yeah, I guess it's like that would be sort of like a non-Cubers perspective, which is sort of what we're going for since the beginner was a non-Cuber a day ago. Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, I think it's pretty difficult to go wrong. I think most videos are not going to like lead you astray. Like, as long as you don't click those videos that are do like these exact moves and you will solve any 3x3 from any state, and it just ends up being RU moves only. Like, obviously, like that stuff is not gonna work. So. You gotta use your brain.
I mean, the way that we're portraying this, basically, also, like, if you're a cuber if you're someone that is thinking about cubing, think about it from this perspective. It's not scary. Like, it is really easy. Like, you're watching a podcast of 3 people at completely different stages of, like, completely different intellects. We have food, we have content creation, we have top secret work. Like, it's all the above in intelligence, you know what I mean?
I thought you were gonna say something like, we have 3 idiots here who all managed to
that's what I was gonna say,
idiocy.
So,
which I mean, true.
On the flip side, morons.
I mean, I agree though, because like, cubing just sort of like has a reputation of being like only for nerdy people just based on what you see on TV and all that.
Yeah, but absolutely, it's not like that whatsoever. Like, it takes no real. Well, this is gonna sound really dumb, but it takes no real mental capacity to solve a Rubik's Cube.
Yeah, I would say
it really just takes perseverance more than anything.
Yeah, you just need to be able to like follow instructions and like do it enough times that it stays in your brain. Yeah. I mean, the analogy I tell non-cubers, like when they say like, oh, I know 57 OLLs and each one is like around 12 moves, and they're like, how do you memorize all that? The analogy I always say is it's sort of like language, because every word you know is sort of just like a random assortment of letters, and you somehow know that like the word congratulations, which is like 18 letters, means something, and you say it right every time just because you're so used to hearing it. Mm-hmm. So if you can learn how to speak a language, you can also learn how to cube.
Yeah. I mean, cubing, like, it teaches you things, right? So it teaches you how to think and learn things in a very organized way. I think that matters a lot because, like, oh, I'm going to learn this, and then I'm going to learn that, and then I'm going to memorize it in this way. Like, say, for example, Carrie, you mentioned, like, learning letter schemes for a 3-blind, for example. Just,
Right.
like, a specific way of thinking is what it teaches you. And it's a skill that maybe you wouldn't know otherwise. It's what's it called? A learned trait? Basically to think in certain ways in the cubing context. But also, I mean, people ask me, like, is there a real benefit to cubing? And sometimes I'll joke around and say, like, no, it's just a toy. Like, I'm just chilling. I'm just, like, messing around. But in actuality, it can rehabilitate your motor function.
Yeah.
I mean, there was a huge, like, thing with Max Park. Like,
I was going to mention Max Park.
Yeah, exactly. He had issues as a kid opening a water bottle. And he picked up a Rubik's Cube as a way to train his motor function.
Yeah,
And
I mean...
Look at where he is now. Yeah.
I know, world record holder.
Yeah, exactly. So...
I mean, even aside from motor functions, like, there's... Yeah, and if you're like an older cuber, it's also just good to just, like, kind of, like, keep you stress your brain a little bit, right? And it's not something that's, like, that's too difficult to do. It's not like, you know, it's like learning an entirely new language, right? Which is very difficult to do. It takes many hours of time. It's something that you can just do in your hand, even if you're just, like, sitting in a meeting, right? And you're just bored. It's just like, all right, I guess it's just time to like mess around, or even just think about, like, okay, like, I see the cubes in this state. What would I do from here? It's something pretty basic that you can do at all hours of the day. So, yeah, we definitely recommend getting into cubing.
I mean, I think I cringe at myself for having cubed as much as I did in high school, though, just because, like, it attracts attention more than I realized. And it's
true.
louder. It's louder than I had thought.
Yeah,
it is very loud.
It's always louder than you think.
Yeah, it is very loud.
Okay, so maybe you shouldn't be cubing in meetings, but
probably not. Like, at least mute your virtual meetings. You know, mute yourself if you're gonna do it. But I feel like. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, one thing quickly I want to say is that one of you mentioned that it sort of, like, is useful because it gets you in a different, like, learning mind state. I have to say that, like, doing 3-blind and, like, being blindfolded and, like, recalling stuff from memory kind of, like, puts me in a different, like, Zen-like state that, well, not Zen, I don't want to sound pretentious, but it's a feeling I don't get from any other activity.
Right, yeah.
Because, like, you're never asked to, like, put all these letters in your brain and then recall them.
Right. Outside of, like, a memory sports thing, it never shows up.
Yeah, but, like, not that many people... Okay, well, probably as many people do memory sports as cubing. I don't want to diss on them. Well, but yeah, it's rare among the general public.
Yeah, no, definitely. Well, what I was going to say is, I don't know if we'll get through all of them, but we should at least talk about some, like, maybe at least one of the barriers.
Yeah, definitely.
For, like, newer cubers. I was thinking maybe we should give advice about sub 30, maybe? Sub 1 or sub 30? What do you guys think is more important at this stage? Maybe sub 1?
I feel like sub 1 was easy for me to pass through, but it's also more exciting because it's like you used to have a time with, like, a colon, and now you can get rid of the colon.
Well, no, I guess to blanket over basically everything that we say is also, like, we're not going to mention the most important thing, which is practice. Like, it sounds really, really stupid because everybody says it all the time, but you know, there's always those memes. It's like, oh, everyone says it all the time because important, or what if everyone just says it because they're dumb? But this is not a meme. This is legit.
No, it's not. I mean, just for context, me as, like, someone who I'd consider myself above average, I'm literally in the middle of a challenge where I'm practicing as much as I can for Mega Makes. So, I mean, the difference between an average of 50 and an average of 100 for whatever puzzle is a huge difference. So just solve more.
Yeah, solve more. Solve more. You don't need to time your solves. Like, I feel like as a beginner, I always wanted to time my solves as much as possible because I wanted to see the progress happening, which is, like, fine. And it's good that you want to see that progress, but you don't have to time all your solves. If you're just sitting in the metro, right, and you have nothing to do, like, you know, you could be reading a book or something, you can whip out a cube and just do that instead. You might get, like, some couple stairs or something, but I mean, like, it's just a good way to practice. I used to do this when I was during an internship. I would commute, like, 20 minutes to and from. I would just grab a Megaminx every single day, and I would just try and do as many solves as I could on the train. And it paid off. Like my Megaminx times totally decreased. Now they're completely awful, but that's a different story.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But yeah. Anyway, yeah.
Did you get comments from like other train goers?
I actually didn't. So which is cool. But during work, sometimes people would I would have it on my desk when I was just bored, and people would be like, "Oh, do you know how to solve this?" I'm like, "Yeah," and they would mess it up, and then they would wait like a minute and a half for me to solve it. And it's like, oh wow, that's really impressive. So there you go. You can make yourself seem like you're way smarter than you actually are. That's what I did.
Yeah, I mean the Megaminx, anything that isn't a 3x3 just looks very intimidating to non-cubers. So,
true.
It just adds to that wow factor.
I mean the sub 30 barrier is practice related, right? I would find that usually if you pump out more solves, you're just gonna have a good chance of being sub 30.
Yeah, I mean it makes sense.
Yeah, I think sub 30 is a lot about practice. I remember around that stage, I also had to kind of be realistic with myself that I was doing a lot of F2L cases very inefficiently.
Yeah.
I remember. Let me just recreate a case here.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, this is Blue Cross. Is this gonna make sense to people?
Yeah, that's
makes
fine.
sense to me.
They should be color neutral. They should be color neutral.
Should be color neutral. I know, but this is for beginners though. I mean, beginners aren't even doing F2L, but I think this is just for the sub 30 case.
Oh,
so
yeah.
if you have the corner here and then the edge here, I would I originally would rotate. This angle's so weird. Pair it up and pull it out, and then rotate back and then insert it. But obviously, it's a rotationless case.
Mm-hmm.
Shoot, I can't recreate it.
The optimal case is very. It's what?
It's just
1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. It's 7 moves.
Yeah,
it's just a variation of sexy. I think it's
it's anti-sexy sexy, right?
Something like that.
I was thinking of the one that's I don't know how to describe it, but yeah, it's 7 moves.
Yeah.
Well, okay, it doesn't really matter about this specific case. I have a different one now. It's more that when you're around sub 30, you could have bad habits that if you just keep practicing them, they actually don't go away.
Yeah.
And I think you have to start analyzing and maybe watching videos of yourselves and being why am I rotating here when I see sub 10 cubers are not?
Yeah. And sometimes you can't port over all of their solutions, but sometimes you can see I was solving this case in this way, and other people are not solving it in this way, and their way seems to be faster, and it seems like something I could try. Let me just try doing it this way, and it'll just work. Or maybe even if you just mess around with it yourself, sometimes you can get that to work. What do you guys think is let's say we're talking from a CFOP solver perspective, right? And most beginners are going to start off with the beginner's method, which is a 7-step solution. Or 7 or 8-step solution. You build a daisy, then you build the cross, then you finish the first layer, second layer, then the 4 steps of last layer. When do you think people should start transitioning towards full CFOP, which is just a 4-step process, just cross, first 2 layers, OL and PLL?
Well, I think that.
Or do they even need to? Maybe they don't need to transition.
Yeah, I never did the daisy thing. I mean, I know I know why it's easier to teach the daisy than pure cross, but because I never learned the daisy thing, I think switching from the daisy to straight to cross is not as hard as maybe learning all of PLL or learning all of OLL. Mm-hmm. It's sort of an intuitive thing that the earlier you start, the quicker you can sort of get an intuition for it.
Right.
Yeah, there should be some clarification. There's technically 2 types of beginner's methods that people can learn. I mean for last layer. So for last layer, the beginner method that I learned was where you did some you oriented the corners and permuted the corners as the last step. And you oriented the edges and you permuted the edges as the first step to the last layer. Now there's an alternative beginner's method solution where you actually solve the entire top color of the 3x3 in 2 algs. So it's kind of like Tulip OLL. The alternative beginner's method will actually teach Tulip OLL. And then it teaches you U-perms.
Right.
Oh, okay.
It teaches you how to.
Different.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's a 2-look PLL. You first permute the corners, then you permute the edges.
So what I would say is if you learn that method in the very beginning, then it's a little bit more straightforward. Just learn PLL because sub 30 is around that point where if you're going to stick with CFOP, and I would suggest exploring other methods, you're probably at that level where you're thinking about it. But at some point, you're going to need to know more algs. You're going to need to know PLL, OLL, or else you're just going to hit a hard cap at some point with your speed. There's just so many moves. There's so many moves that you can make before you start to see no more improvement.
Right.
So you need to get more familiar with it. And I think sub 30, your brain is at that capacity of cubing where you could learn it. If you learn the alternative, like the very, very beginner's method solution, you're going to have to learn the 2-look OLL. And then you learn 2-look PLL. So you have to go to that step. You have to learn that new method. And then you have to switch from 2-look PLL to PLL. So my advice essentially is learn PLL at some capacity.
Yeah, I think I agree. Like PLL is not, I feel like, is not a hard requirement for being sub 30, but it's something that can like push you over the edge if you're like stuck at 31, or if you're stuck at 30 XX, and you just need to get over the hump. Then PLL is one way that you can definitely do it. And PLL is not a huge alg set either. It's gonna sound like kind of intimidating because it's 21 algorithms. But if you know the 2-look PLL, then you already know like somewhere between like
7.
I think 2-look PLL is at least 1 A perm and then 4 edge. No, probably no. It's probably just so you probably know 2 of them already. And a lot of them are like relatively, or like they are very finger trick friendly. So there are a lot of good algorithms out there to learn them. And the other thing is you don't have to learn all of them if you don't want to, but even learning a couple of them are going to turn your, like the number of times that you'll need to use 1 algorithm instead of 2 is just going to increase. So PLL is a very, very easy beginner subset to start learning.
Yeah, and when you're like halfway there, if you've learned like 10 PLLs and you haven't finished the rest, it just means that half of your solves will sort of have that shortcut 1 alg to the end. So you'll already see your average kind of drop because of that.
Yeah. And then the logic too, like we're not just talking about learning algs for the sake of learning algs. The reason why OLL isn't as important is just based off of the experiences that we've had in other cubers. 2-look PLL, it doesn't save as many moves transitioning to OLL as 2-look PLL to PLL, right?
Definitely.
Yeah.
And then there are so many more OLLs just to learn. Learning curve is a lot more. And then, like for example, Colin Burns, the world record holder, infamously never learned 2-look OLL. Or I mean, he never learned full OLL. And I have plenty of friends that are still using 2-look OLL. In fact, some optimal OLL cases are 2-look OLL. So, which is like insane. So is this, in terms of the distribution and the experience, like it's just with the data that we have. That's why PLL, we can confidently recommend it at this stage. Whereas OLL, you're not going to hear us say that.
Yeah, I mean, I still don't know full OLL. Part of that is because my solve style is weird. But like, you know, I was still able to get 12-second average without knowing full OLL. So you don't need full OLL to definitely not at the sub 30 stage. I think mostly you can do mostly practice. PLL is a good one, and then you should. I think another good thing is you can start introducing some F2L cases. There are some cases that are going to be really, really annoying, that are going to be hard to deal with. For example, like flipped edges or flipped corners. Those ones are probably pretty hard to deal with. But if you see like a simple F2L case, and it's just like, okay, the pair is already made for you, then you should just insert the pair, right? Figure out some alternate way to insert the pair, instead of just inserting the edge, instead of inserting the corner first and then trying to insert the edge. You'll just save moves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
I was also going to say, like, I think these are all very helpful for CFOP, but I don't know if it's like worthy to even like bring up Rue, because
might as well.
Like, not many beginners use it, but I definitely think that Rue is useful because you don't have to turn as fast to get sub 30, and like it has a similar thing to PLL, where a lot of beginners will know to look CMLL, and it's like learning full CMLL will kind of like also take you from like a 31 to like a 29, I think. And
I mean,
like
in
42
fact,
hours.
learning Ru when in a 2-look CMLL stage requires much less ALX.
Yeah, I think it should be less. Well, CMLL is what 42 ALX.
Yeah.
All you need to do is like, it's similar to 2-look OLL in terms of the number of ALX you use, but even less because you don't consider edges, right? You just
It's actually it should be exactly the same as COLL.
Yeah,
the same number.
Same as COLL.
Yeah.
But like it has a lot lot of very nice ALX like FRU, R prime, U prime, F prime.
Yeah, because you don't need to worry about the you don't need to worry about the edges. Yeah, you don't need to maintain their orientation. So so I think CML should be an easier it should be easier than COLL.
Yeah, I was gonna say
Right.
like the reason why I put that caveat in there, like feel free to explore the methods, is because Ru uses less. Ru uses a bit more free flowing. Like if you're a beginner, I don't know how easy it is. I don't know how easy it is for you to be able to catch on to the first block, second block, solving that last layer type situation with the find the arrow and then orient everything. But once you pick that up, I mean, it's a little bit of a grind, but I mean, this is cubing. We already mentioned it doesn't require massive brain power,
Yeah.
Just requires dedication. So
Yeah.
I think Ru is a huge option for beginner cubers, especially with the hardware for M slices.
Yep.
It's
Exactly.
great.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, maybe like 15 years ago we wouldn't recommend it because M slices would suck, but they don't anymore.
Oh, I definitely have an easy not recommendation though. Manu.
Okay.
Unfortunately, I would not recommend ZZ.
ZZ is very like so the reason
EO line is
so the reason why we recommend learning like a CFOP-esque beginner method, right? Like is it's easier for you to, I think at least it should be easier for beginners to catch on to because it requires a lot less spatial like spatial manipulation. Like once you solve the first 2 layers, you're done. You just never think about those first 2 layers ever again. You're only dealing with 9 pieces now. Whereas like ZZ, Ru, Petrus, like all of these are way more free flowing, which is powerful in their own way. It allows you to save moves because you don't need to worry about preserving certain parts of the cube. But it's very difficult to get the hang of because there's less structure. It feels like there's less structure what's going on. For example, like when we talk about ZZ, the big thing is learning EO. And EO and EO stands for edge orientation. It requires like thought process to first define what it means for edges to be oriented. Then you need to be able to figure out which edges are oriented, which edges aren't oriented. Then you need to actually do the steps in order to orient the edges, which is not super obvious, I think. Once you know the definition, like now it makes sense that okay, now I don't need to do any F or B moves or any rotations to solve the rest of the cube. But it's not. You don't really see the payoff like immediately if you're like a beginner speed cuber because it just looks the same. It like if I give you a cube that had EO done and a totally just scrambled cube, it would look more or less the same. It wouldn't
look more solved.
Even though there's like more structure there. It's like a latent structure that's hard to see.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. I mean, I don't think there's a single person who has learned ZZ as their first method. Okay, I could be wrong, but
I think I don't know if Tiffany did actually.
Oh, Tiffany. Oh,
but I mean, you're gonna see these methods in circulation. I just want to tell you guys, don't learn ZZ. I swear to this.
So you should probably not learn ZZ as a beginner method. If you become interested in it, like I don't know, like I don't really like CFOP because I think it's boring. I think ZZ is much more interesting. Then you can learn it later. But of course, like you have to also be prepared to take the hits in your averages, which I am totally fine with for the record.
Yeah, exactly. And I think this like ties into what Michael was mentioning earlier about like you want to find something that makes solving fun so that you'll come back to it. And like Manu said, EO line is not very visible, but like with CFOP you can actually like see the solve chunk growing on the cube much easier. So it's like, oh, I'm making progress, and then you want to continue, and maybe you'll practice 5 days instead of 4 days.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Oh, I didn't even we could explain this too. EO line, like the first step of ZZ, doesn't even solve anything. I mean, it solves 2 pieces, but
that's it.
That's it. Like half of the moves that you're doing at the very beginning is not solving any.
Way less than half of the moves that you do.
Yeah, you
actually
don't,
do
you
anything.
You don't see. There's no visual payoff. So, just something to note.
Yeah. Plus, and the thing is, like, the brain is really good at like putting away things that like are already done, right? For like, if like once you've already done things, your brain is like, okay, I'm done with this. I know that this is going to stay this way, so now I just don't need to deal with it ever again. But with ZZ, that isn't the case, right? Like, if doing like 10 moves to solve only 2 pieces is pretty awful for your brain, because you need to like track where the next pieces are going to be, and that it's a lot of moves. Whereas like for cross, if you do a cross in 5 moves, you already have 4 pieces solved, and 5 moves is way easier for you to track like corners and edges, so it flows a lot better. This is the main problem I'm having with ZZ right now. So
yeah, I think it's interesting because like if you like an advanced cuber, does feel satisfied when they see like white or yellow on the top and bottom. Mm-hmm. But that's like kind of like an intuition that you only get after years of doing this, and we're talking to beginners right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you guys think there's anything else for sub 30? Now that we're kind of wrapping back around.
Well, I don't know if there's so much about sub 30 because there's a lot of other videos about that. But one other like topic I wanted to quickly talk about is like new cubers when they go to a competition for the first time, like feel intimidated. And one thing that I not regret, but I think I could have done better is like on my first few competitions, I pretty much like kept to the same friend, or 2 friends over and over again. And okay, I'm trying to think like if there's anything to really teach about this, but
be outgoing.
Yeah, I mean, like, that's just, like, the lesson that, like, everyone teaches, not even just in cubing, but just in the world. So I need to be, like, unique somehow.
So one thing that I thought was cool is, like, I think I would not be in cubing now if it weren't for I competed in 2 competitions in 2013. I didn't really know anyone. My parents took me to my competitions or whatever. And in 2016, I went to a competition, and at that competition, I decided to actually staff. But by staff, I mean, it was just like people were just calling up. It's like, okay, like we need more judges. Can someone do this stuff? Like, okay, like, like I've been on the competitor side, learning how to judge is like not that much harder. And by doing that, and me not knowing what I was doing as a judge, which I guess was not a good thing, I had to ask other people. It's like, okay, like, like what am I supposed to do? I don't really understand what's happening. And I made a friend. His name is Javier, and we still talk from time to time to this day. And there were other competitions where I've gone to in that area, and he's there at the competition. It's like, oh my goodness, it's like so good to see you again after all this time. And I think that really kickstarted for me, because then when I moved to Berkeley, it's like, okay, like now I had experience staffing in a competition. Let me try staffing here, and then the rest is history.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a good story because it kind of teaches you that, like, when you staff or when you like try to contribute, even if you do it wrong, you're at least kind of putting yourself into kind of the flow of things, and like you're now like a cog in the machine, which usually is a bad thing. But if you're a cog in the machine, then like now people have a reason to like talk to you or a reason to like point out that you're doing something wrong.
Well, as long as you don't like mess up really badly. Like, obviously you should know what you're doing. Don't be like me. Like, know what you're doing before you get there. But yeah, it just gives you an opportunity to talk to people.
Yeah, but like I think it's too easy to become like a competitor who does nothing and then like is pretty invisible.
Right.
Because then no one really has a reason to notice that you're there.
Well, there like also like a competition is a space where you can kind of be whoever you want to be. You could be a staffer. You could be like a content creator. You could be a really fast. You could be a fast boy. You could be a fast boy, right? You could be a social basically like a socialite. You could be like a hermit. I mean, it's okay. You could be whatever you want at the end of the day. But what I would say, as I think is very, very important, and I don't think cubers hear this enough. Overpracticing is a thing. If you care about your results. If you overpractice, think about you're an athlete. If you use your fingers too much, you're gonna get
carpal tunnel.
Well, your fingers are gonna get tired. I was thinking about the best way to phrase it, but you're gonna get tired, and you're not gonna feel it because it's your fingers.
Yeah, this is the thing. I mean, Lucas Etter, you know, the first person in the world to ever get a sub 5 solve. He had, I think, some pretty bad arthritis in his hands because I don't know if it was because he cubed a lot, but it kept him out of the scene for a long time. I think he made a return at some point, but I mean, yeah, I don't know if it was due to overpractice or whatever, but I could definitely see overpractice leading to something like that. So, just take care of yourself, right?
Think about it. If you're doing an average of 1,000 at home, are you going to get your best solves at solve 300 or solve 900? Like, it's the same thing. You're going to get fatigue. And so don't sweat about, like, I'm going to practice, like, 50 solves before I go out for my official result. You just need to get warmed up. Like any athlete, you just get warmed up. Mm-hmm. Practice your PLLs, maybe spam some TPS, maybe you need hand warmers, whatever you need. But if you're doing too many solves, you're gonna
it also like messes up your head sometimes.
Exactly. It's a mental thing too. You're gonna psych yourself out.
Yeah,
exactly.
I feel like it all is coming back to this theme that we keep pulling from. It's just like if it's not fun for you, you just shouldn't do it. Like do the things that are fun for you, right? If doing 1,000 solves a day is not fun for you, then just don't do it. You don't need to do it, right? Like you can cruise just by doing 10 solves a day. You can probably like cruise by if you don't do any time solves a day, and just figuring out what's going on. Do whatever is most fun for you, and yeah, hopefully you get more involved in the scene, and maybe, who knows, maybe we'll see you at a competition soon.
Oh my gosh, that'd be cool to meet a cuber who's like, I first started cubing watching Overinspected. That would be
wild.
That would actually be mind blowing. I don't think like truthfully, like making Overinspected, I mean, we're on episode 11 now. That's not something I think about actually, but it would be really cool.
That's crazy.
Yeah. But so the lesson here is like there can be too much of a good thing. If you're feeling like your solving session is going on too long, then it must come to an end. So if a podcast is also going on for too long, it should also come to an end.
Carrie's segues are too good.
Whoa, okay. All right. Wow, okay.
Too good.
Clever.
Yeah.
This is the YouTube master, man.
No, I don't know if that was smooth or that was cringe, but either way.
It was smooth.
I think episode 11 is closing up. So, beginner cubers, I hope your cubing endeavors go well, and I think we will sign off. Goodbye.